Over the past week, the war in Ukraine has seemed quieter in the headlines, while significant upheavals have emerged in other regions. Why is this happening, and who is benefiting from these conflicts? We'll explore these questions in today's video, but first, let's start with news from the battlefield. Desertion is the most serious issue for Ukraine. At the moment, the battlefield situation over the past 24 hours has seen some noteworthy developments. In central Kurakhovo, Russia has gained control over most of the city. Russian forces have made significant advances in the Sukhoi Yalov and Constantinople areas in the south. In Sukhoi Yalov, Russian troops have approached the closest distance to the western Kurakhovo highway, now less than 5 kilometers away. The situation around Pokrovsk is becoming critical. Russian forces are advancing towards Pokrovsk from the southeast along the main highway and have begun attacking the village of Shevchenko. This village holds strategic importance for the Russians, as it can serve as a staging ground for further offensive actions. The two axes of attack, Kurakhovo and Pokrovsk, are considered decisive for the outcome in the Donetsk region, with all assessments indicating Ukraine is at a severe disadvantage. However, the issue of lacking weapons or a workforce is not as dire as the declining morale among Ukrainian soldiers. This is the Achilles heel of Kiev's forces and a significant reason for Russia's rapid advances over the past few months. The latest articles from mainstream Western media continue to paint a grim picture of the front lines. On December 1st, the Financial Times began its article with an unsettling admission. In the first 10 months of this year than in the previous 2 years of the war, highlighting Kiev's struggle to replenish its frontline ranks as Russia captures more territory in eastern Ukraine. In a rare and unusual moment, the newspaper even acknowledged the occurrence of multiple mutinies within the ranks of the Ukrainian army. In a standout case in late October, hundreds of infantry serving in Ukraine's 123 Brigade abandoned their positions in the eastern town of Vuhledar. They returned to their homes in the Mykolaiv region, where some staged a rare public protest demanding more weapons and training. The Associated Press, AP, shared a similar story, reporting that desertion was one of the main reasons Ukraine lost the town of Vuhledar in October. Ukrainian officials and soldiers told AP that, facing every imaginable shortage, tens of thousands of Ukrainian troops, tired and bereft, have walked away from combat and frontline positions to slide into anonymity. The article revealed that a Ukrainian parliamentarian even stated that 100,000 deserters might reach as high as 200,000. The Economist previously claimed that Ukraine currently has at least 500,000 irrecoverable casualties. If we add this number to the 200,000 deserters, Ukraine has effectively lost 700,000 troops, a conservative estimate based on Western sources, which tend to underreport actual figures. Amid waves of casualties and desertion, the Kiev administration is grappling with a severe workforce shortage. As a result, even if the West provided more money and weapons, Kiev still needed more troops to fight. In the final days of its term, the Biden administration is trying to rush additional aid to Ukraine. However, House Speaker Mike Johnson recently poured cold water on these efforts, stating that the House has no plans to vote on supplemental assistance to Ukraine and asserting, "So it is not the place of Joe Biden to make that decision now. We have a newly elected president, and we're going to wait and take the new commander-in-chief's direction on all that, so I don't expect any Ukraine funding to come up now." It was reported that President Biden had submitted a request to Congress seeking an additional $24 billion in aid for Ukraine in 2025. However, House Speaker Johnson bluntly rejected the proposal. This indicates that Ukraine's hopes for continued U.S. assistance once Trump takes office have officially evaporated, and now they are left relying solely on European support. However, as we have analyzed, this continent faces political, social, and economic difficulties. The latest news reveals that one of Ukraine's 3 key European pillars, France, is in a state of turmoil due to the collapse of the government after Prime Minister Barnier lost a vote of confidence. A temporary government will oversee the country until President Macron appoints a new prime minister. France may rely on emergency laws to manage tax collection and spending on critical matters. Ukraine will not be on France's already chaotic agenda. Amidst this unfavorable situation, President Zelensky has softened his stance on territorial concessions. 3 plans by Trump for Ukraine. Why I am disappointed by the absence of NATO troops taking over the front line. Since the conflict erupted in February 2022, President Zelensky has promised that his country will win the war and that victory would not only involve regaining the pre-war territories in the Crimean Peninsula. As late as October, Zelensky continued to assert that Ukraine would not concede any of its territories to Russia. However, as Russian forces increasingly break through Ukraine's fortified defense lines, this creates a new reality in Kyiv. On November 21st, Fox News asked President Zelensky whether he would accept any kind of ceasefire or peace agreement that requires conceding some of Ukraine's territories to Russia. His response differed significantly from his previous statements. He said, "We cannot legally recognize any of Ukraine's occupied territories as Russian. This refers to the territories occupied by Putin before the full-scale invasion in 2014. Legally, we do not recognize it or accept it." However, when specifically asked if he was willing to give up Crimea to pursue a peace agreement to end this war, Zelensky replied, "We understand that Crimea can be brought back diplomatically." This is a clear shift from his previous stance, and it seems Zelensky accepts that gaining Crimea through military means is impossible. The Fox News interview was not the first time Zelensky acknowledged the reality of the situation. The Financial Times recently reported that there have been private talks in Kyiv into an adverse deal with Moscow that would pose grave risks for future European and American security. A week later, in an interview with Sky News, Zelensky went even further, stating, "If we want to end the hot phase of the war, we should bring the Ukrainian territories we currently control under NATO's protection. This is something we need to do quickly. After that, Ukraine can reclaim the rest of its territories through diplomatic means." In other words, Zelensky has officially confirmed the de facto territorial concessions, while legally he seeks NATO forces to enforce security along Ukraine's internationally recognized borders. Of course, NATO is not in a position to offer such security guarantees to Ukraine. This idea aligns with President Putin's recent proposal, where he stated that Ukrainian troops must completely withdraw from the annexed territories. Still, he did not mention that Ukraine must legally recognize Russia's annexation of those territories. It also mirrors the stance of Vice President-elect J.D. Vance, who believes Ukraine will have to cede some territories to the Russians. In territorial disputes, it is common for a country to claim ownership of a territory without fully exercising jurisdiction over it, a tactic often used in international diplomacy. Therefore, the Kyiv administration's acknowledgement that they will not win the war militarily and need to start negotiating a solution before losing more territory is commendable. However, the hardline stance of the incoming Trump administration is the key factor forcing Kyiv to choose between escalating under the influence of the deep state or following Trump's approach. As reported by Reuters today, December 5th, one of the most notable developments right now is that all of Trump's potential peace plans related to Ukraine focus on the formula of territorial concessions and Ukraine not becoming a NATO member. There are currently three main initiatives, one from future Ukraine envoy Keith Kellogg, another from Vice President-elect J.D. Vance, and the third from Trump advisor Richard Grenell. All three proposals exclude Ukraine's NATO membership, which President Zelensky has been demanding, while also rejecting the idea of regaining Ukrainian territory through military means and preventing hostile actions along the front lines. Kellogg's plan, as we have analyzed, involves freezing the conflict along the front lines and compelling both parties to sit at the negotiation table by cutting military aid to Kyiv and gradually lifting sanctions on Russia. It also delays Ukraine's NATO membership for 20 years. Vance's plan includes creating a demilitarized zone along the front lines to prevent further Russian attacks. His proposal also excludes Ukraine's NATO membership. In contrast, former National Intelligence Director under Trump's first term, Richard Grenell, proposed the creation of autonomous zones in eastern Ukraine while also opposing Ukraine's NATO membership. He has yet to finalize his plan on Trump's side, as Reuters reports, stating that a peace deal will depend on the direct involvement of Trump, Putin, and Zelensky. What is most notable, however, is that none of the three peace proposals mentioned above includes sending Western troops to the front lines. This also signals that any strategies from the France-UK axis have failed. You must surely ask yourself why France and the UK have been so prominent in supporting Ukraine, even though Germany is the country providing the most financial aid to Kyiv. However, throughout the war, the UK and France have made the strongest statements, particularly the British Prime Ministers, who have been present at every key escalation of the conflict, from convincing Zelensky to continue the war just weeks after Russia's invasion, to supporting Ukraine's long-range missile attacks on Russian territory. This is a long story involving historical and geopolitical issues, and we will continue exploring it in future videos. For now, goodbye and see you again.